and welcome to the Brave Feminine Leadership interview series. I'm your host, Melissa Hamilton, and it is brilliant to have you here today. Our interview series is where I get to indulge one of my absolute passions and meet with incredible global leaders, and we then get to soak up their incredible perspective and wisdom on all things life and leadership. And today I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by the wonderful Kathy Grigg, who I first met when she interviewed me for a board role. Welcome, Kathy.
Hi, Melissa, and thank you very much.
So let me share your bio for people that haven't come across you before, Kathy. So Kathy Griggs brings a wealth of experience across finance, business management, boardrooms, agricultural and education. Her executive career included senior roles in the wool trading industry, culminating as CFO of a group of international companies. Today, Kathy serves as a Director of GrainCorp and Agricultural Innovation Australia, and has previously held board roles across sectors including financial services, agribusiness, health and education, with companies including Suncorp Superannuation, Australian Pork Limited, Navy Health and Monash Health. An absolute highlight of Kathy's portfolio career was 12 years on the Council of Deakin University, including as Deputy Chancellor. Kathy is a fellow of both the Australian Institute of Company Directors and CPA Australia, and when she's not in the boardroom, she and her husband run a cattle property in northeast Victoria. Can't wait to hear about that, Kathy. So for people who haven't had the pleasure of coming across you before, Kathy, can I ask you the question, can you tell us who are you as a human being? And let's get into this incredible career of yours.
Okay, so where do we start? Well, I'm originally from South Australia. I was born and raised on a farming property in the mid-north of South Australia, which was wool growing and grains, wheat and barley. Educated partly in country South Australia and then in Adelaide, secondary education in Adelaide, and then to Adelaide University, where I did in those days what was called a Bachelor of Economics, but you'd call it a Bachelor of Commerce these days. And then I spent a few years teaching, which was what I always set out to do. And then I travelled overseas for a while, and I came back from overseas and I thought, I think I'll have a change. And having done the BEc, majoring in accounting and economics, I thought there are other opportunities I could pursue. So I did. I didn't set out specifically to work in the agricultural sector, but the job that I got, the first job that I got was in the wool industry.
Okay.
So it was a very exciting job, and it was sort of, I guess, akin to my background anyway, so I was very happy to take it up. So I moved to Melbourne for that role, and I've been in Melbourne ever since. So I started that role, which was in what they call their fibre marketing area, as an analyst. And then I had the opportunity to work through a number of roles in what was then the Australian Wool Corporation. I worked on a major systems project implementing really the first sort of portable computer systems that went around to wool sales, which was very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And also set up, as part of that, which the wool industry led in, electronic data transmission. And I'm talking back quite a few years here, so it's commonplace now, but it wasn't then. So I then moved into other roles, one in market development, which gave me the opportunity to travel in China, Indonesia, Philippines as part of new market developments. Although China now buys about 75% of the wool clip, in those days it was early days and they weren't buying anywhere near that amount, of course. So going into China in the 1980s was really quite interesting.
I can imagine.
And then following that, I had the opportunity to work in one of our key operational areas. The organisation had its central functions, but it also had three major regional areas covering Australia. I took up a role in what was the Southern region, which was also based in Melbourne, but outside of the head office. And it was involved in wool trading, wool grower services, property management, warehousing, etc. After about 3 or 4 years of that, I was offered the role of regional manager for that whole region. And I didn't expect to be offered that role. And I was extremely nervous about taking it up. But it was one of those brave steps you take, and you do it and you take it up. And working in a predominantly male environment at the time, it presented a few challenges, but you just work your way through those. And I thoroughly enjoyed both of those roles as in the regional operational area. It involved a lot of wool trading, a lot of logistics, management and warehousing and that type of thing. So
is that the one that you told me? I know when we spoke previously, you said that was probably your favourite role. Is that the role that
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. It meant that you're involved in the day-to-day operational side of the wool industry. You're dealing with all sorts of other businesses as part of that, whether it's wool growers through to wool brokers, your elders, nutrients, people like that, the wool trading companies from who buy on behalf of, Japan, Italy, Europe, etc. And as well as all your warehousing, leasing and all the rest of it. So you're dealing with a whole range of operational issues. So it was very, very dynamic, very interesting role. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Following that, I was offered the CFO role for the Australian business, as there were changes in company structures along the way as well. And I took that up. Again, it wasn't one that I was really expecting, but it was offered, so I jumped at the opportunity. And then after a few years, we had a separate international business that was totally separately managed from the UK, but we decided to integrate management with the Australian management. So I took up the CFO role for the global part of the business as well.
Mm.
So then after a few years of that, the company got split into two parts. So my role went two different ways. That's when I decided, one of those junctures in the road where you say, what do I do next?
Yeah.
At that stage, I was already doing one external board role. So I had a bit of a flavour of that. So I had the thinking to do I do another executive role or do I do the board roles?
Mm.
I opted for the board roles and didn't regret it for 1 minute.
The rest is history. It's interesting listening to you reflect on the career, because we'll have people listening to this conversation who are at all different stages of their career. And when I listen to some of the language you use on the way through, it's like you didn't expect that opportunity, but it came up. So it sounds in some ways that, I mean, you had an amazing career moving through that organisation, probably worked hard, head down, got on with it. Do you think you were intentional about your career at that point, or was it more just opportunistic what came up, and then the decision point to exit and to move out to the board roles became very intentional? How would you reflect on that?
Look, I think it was a bit of both on the way through.
Yeah.
You clearly, I think if you, as you said, put your head down and get on with the job, I think people then, and if your skills are broad enough and you can adapt those skills, then I think people will recognise you for other roles. And I think it's part of that too is having people around you who know you and who are willing to take the risk with you in putting you into different roles. Some people are very risk averse like that, and they won't consider somebody going into a different type of role. Particularly taking up the CFO role when I hadn't come up through the finance department, which is the most normal route. So that was a bit of a risk on their behalf to even suggest that. But I think you've got to put trust in the people who put trust in you as well.
I love that line. That's such good advice. When you can't find the confidence yourself, it's if you trust the people that are making those decisions and recommendations, sometimes you can lean on theirs a little bit, can't you?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
let me ask you then, on the way through your career, do you feel like, and I can ask this about the board space as well, but maybe your executive career firstly, along the way, was there some important feedback you got that might have been difficult to hear but really helped you grow?
Oh, look, I think you've always got to be attuned to that. I think I've been fortunate that I've had, uh, people above me who have worked closely with me and who guide you when you need guidance.
Mm.
And you've got to have an open mind to that. And I think you can't just, blast full steam ahead without stopping and thinking at times about what's going on. And you've got to have a sense of feedback too, even if the feedback's not directly given to you, as a sit down sort of words. It's having a sense around you that when you know something is right or working well, or if it's not working well. And I think you've got to have your antenna up all the time about the environment and how you're being assessed. And I think when I went into that operational role, it was such a male environment. It was the first time a female had been anywhere near a role like that.
Mm.
And you were sort of put on the under judgment a
Yeah.
lot by all these external people who you had to deal with. So they sort of sit back and look and observe. They give you a bit of time. If you pass muster, then off you go. They're just fine to work with you. But if you made any sort of blunders that, they wouldn't have put a male through the same environment, but if you'd made any sort of blunders, well, then you were probably going to be persona non grata.
Yeah.
But you've just got to have those antennae around you, and you've got to be yourself at the end of the day, and just get on with the job, get on with other people, and be yourself. Don't try and put on any other fronts or disguises or anything like that.
I assume it was useful coming from the land yourself in terms of some of those interactions at that time.
Yeah. Yes, I think you do. You sort of grow up with that. You
Yeah.
understand the environment and the type of people who are working in that environment. So it's sort of second nature, I suppose, in some ways as well, even though it's in the middle of Melbourne.
Yeah. So how did you were already on a board role. Had that been a sort of intentional move or how had that come about? Because I guess that opened your eyes up to where to from
Yeah.
the executive
I
role.
guess it was that stage of my career, even before the divestiture of the organisation into two parts. And again, it was part of the development program that I was going through at the time, and I'd done the AICD course at the
Mm.
same time, and the opportunity came up really through the audit partner that I was dealing with at the time for some of our audit work, and the opportunity came up through that, and so I sort of took a close look at the opportunity and had agreement from my chief executive at the time and the board at the time to undertake it. So I was very appreciative of that. And as I said, it gave me a flavour of being a non-exec board director at the same time as being an executive. So, you sort of have to pretty quickly pick your sort of role and know where the boundaries are. So it sort of came about through that, and I was very appreciative that I had the opportunity to consider that type of role before I got to that fork in the road.
So then you're at the fork in the road, and this will be the part because I know there'll be a lot of people watching here who either have started that or they're considering taking that path. What did you what did you do? How did you sort of navigate that next move? You've got one board role. I assume you stayed on that role.
Yes,
Yeah.
I eventually became chair of that company.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, I stayed on that board, and look, as everybody will tell you, it's a range of things. It's contacts, just letting people know they're the roles that you're looking for. Um, uh, Use of headhunters to some extent, and contacts, and but also being clear about what sort of things you want to do. Having a strategy, if you like, about the types of roles you'd like to undertake, the types of industries or areas that you're interested in, types of organisations you're interested in, and having some clarity about that, I think, is also helpful. And I guess first you leverage off where your skills really are and where your background expertise is in. You leverage off that first, but then as you get experience in some roles, you can take it beyond that as you develop your general board skills as a director across some different organisations. You become much more able to move into different types of industries and organisations as a result.
Kathy, a lot of people have been, head down in their executive career and haven't necessarily nurtured a lot of their connections and contacts. Had you always nurtured your contacts, or did you have to go through any of that awkward? I hear from a lot of people, it's like, well, I don't want to reach out to them. I haven't been in touch with them for 15 years now. I want something. Did you go through any
Yeah,
of that?
I was very, very well. I was never a good networker. Never did that to any degree. Found it very uncomfortable to a point, and not reaching out to people unless I knew them quite well. So very limited, and takes time and a bit of persistence, and just having your eyes open to opportunities that might exist.
I was just going to ask, when I did the introduction, we saw just how diverse your board career has been. So obviously, to use your language, you've passed muster on a number of occasions, Kathy, and continue to, grow and develop into these roles. Um, is there a red thread when you look back through the diversity of all these roles? Is there kind of a red thread or a connection between them that you see when you look backwards? Because they're really diverse.
Yeah, look, probably because I've been a CFO and I had the commerce degree, membership of CPA, etc. The obvious role is audit committees. All boards are looking for people to go on audit committees. So you sort of immediately fit that bill, if you like. And that can take you through being more generic skills, if you like, can take you into different types of industries and organisations. So that was probably the common thing. But also in saying that, you've got to be conscious of what things you want to join as well, in terms of, do you like the purpose of the organisation? Do you like the industry, the role they're involved in, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I think that provided the common thread that aside from the specific experience that I'd had in the ag sector, it meant that you could take those broader finance type skills into other organisations.
What do you look for when you do due diligence yourself? I can hear there you're talking about, the purpose and things like that. But what are the sort of things you sit down and evaluate when you're looking at, is there room for someone else in your
Well,
portfolio?
yeah, look, well, first of all, I think you've got to be comfortable with that type of industry, and the organisation is positioned within that sector, whatever it might be, whether it's for profit or not for profit or government related or whatever it might be. And then you start on your due diligence around, particularly other members of the board, CEOs, senior management, and sort of doing your homework on all of that. Doing your homework on what their strategy is how they're viewed in the general community that they operate in, and depending how far you get along the road to it, obviously you do less at the start, and as you progress through it, you're doing more and more. And one of the important things I would do is talk to, if you're right near the pointy end of it, be talking to the auditors about the business and any external stakeholders that have very close relationships with that organisation. So there's a range of things, and you may use some of your own contacts who have familiarity with that organisation, and to see what they think of it, what's their track record with it, any observations that they wish to make, etc. So there's a range of things. It takes quite a while, but it's important to do before you go onto a board.
Did you learn any lessons along the way?
Absolutely.
Any that you are prepared to share?
Oh, look, I think a lot of it comes down to, because sitting around a boardroom table, you've got to feel comfortable, but not overly comfortable. You don't want to all be the same, but comfortable that you're working with a good group of colleagues. It's your reputation at the end of the day, and reputation is all important in this sector. So you need to, I guess, associate yourself in company that is not going to unduly cause any significant effect to your own reputation. And I think that's the thing about boards in general when considering going on boards, is that I've always taken the view that you should never be financially dependent on a board. You've got to be able to walk away from it if you feel in any way some discomfort with what's happening, or you don't like the direction of it, or whatever it might be. You've got to be able to immediately walk away from it. So it means not being financially dependent on any particular board. Hard to think about maybe for people that want to develop it as a career, but if you've got a range of boards, then easier to manage. But that's one sort of view that I always took, because you've just got to be able to put the pen to paper and walk away.
So it's really interesting, when you say that, I wonder whether there's a connection here. But do you think there's a point in someone's career where they should start thinking about boards? Like, if longer term that's what they want to do, how early would you advise people to be thinking about boards?
Well, I've always thought you've got to get some runs on the board. You've got to have gone through some roles, let's say most commonly it's executive roles, that take you through the mill over a period of time. I think once you've done that and you understand the cycles, the ups and downs, the nuances, the things that can happen in organisations, the working with other people, the pressures of executive roles, and the performance side of that, I think you make a better board director than if you've had very little experience. Now, having said that, sometimes you take on, boards might be looking for a director that's got a really particular type of technical expertise or something of that nature, which is a different type of background and a different set of criteria you might adopt for recruiting somebody for that purpose. But if the general sort of recruitment, I think, requires, a certain amount of having done the hard yards through other roles, management roles, whatever they might be, before you go into boards. Because I think at the end of the day, boards, it involves a lot of judgment, and judgment can only come from experience. So I think having a level of experience is really important to affect how your judgment works.
Do you think back, I mean, even today, do you still use things out of your executive roles when you're sitting on boards?
Oh, look, I think so. I think so. Yeah, I guess because I've tended to be on audit committees in every organisation or chaired audit committees in every organisation I've been involved in.
Yeah.
So you have some sympathy for the CFO, I guess, in terms of the roles that they undertake and so forth. And I think you also understand and I think directors can underestimate the work required in preparing for board meetings by management and being conscious of what you're asking management. You know, if you're asking a whole set of other information that you think, oh, that would be interesting to know, and of course, you know, they will do it, but be mindful that is that really necessary? You're going to set them off on a whole task, a whole lot of work.
Mm.
Um, be mindful that that's really important to have that work done and not be encroaching on resourcing unnecessarily. And I think having been on the executive side, you sort of understand that a bit better because you know what's involved in
Absolutely.
preparation for board meetings, etc. So, and just the general experience you bring from you know the things that can happen in organisations, whether it's personnel matters or whether it's dealing with stakeholders or whatever it might be.
What do you think are the things that are keeping boards awake? And it probably differs by industry, but what do you think are the things keeping boards awake at the moment, Kathy?
Well, I guess this year in particular, it's what's going on with the geopolitical, or as I heard somebody describe it, the geoeconomic
Yeah.
issues that are taking place. And that's look, it's probably affecting just about every organisation in some way or another, but in different ways. So that just sort of thinking through, because you really don't know what's going to happen in some cases,
No.
hard to
Hour by
predict.
hour.
Yes. So you need to, I guess, be thinking through various scenarios, and you know you can't prepare for every type of one, but you've got to make sure you've got the resilience and the adaptability to deal with what might come along in that space, and that is you know I think one factor, and I think beyond those that particular issue, there's obviously things like cyber's always there for every organisation. There's the broader economic outlook about, are we going into recession? Is it a strong economy, a weak economy? What's happening around other economies that you might be trading with? Um, I think other things like the use of artificial intelligence and being conscious and mindful of how that's been used in the organisation. Um, and I think the personnel side has settled down a bit. I think, the recruitment is a bit easier than it was. We went through those periods around COVID and post-COVID. I think that's sort of settled a bit more. And then all industries will have their own specific issues. And of course, in the ag sector, it's always the weather, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So So that plays a big factor in what goes on as well as demand, the shift in demand. And it's not just the weather in Australia. It could be the weather in the Northern Hemisphere that could affect, for example, what happens to grain crops in Europe or Canada or USA, and how that affects the grain trading business from Australia. Those sorts of things.
Mm.
So yeah, there's a range of those things specific to your own industry as well.
Arguably, one of the most important roles that boards do is finding a CEO. And I'm incredibly passionate about seeing more female CEOs step into roles. But what are you looking for? Like on the boards you're on, with all of those complexities going on around us, what are you looking for and thinking about when you're bringing a new CEO in?
Um, well, yeah, I guess clearly you're looking for certain skill areas, certain background and experience and skills that might be most useful for your own sector. Beyond the skills, background, experience, I think it's the personal characteristics that are really important. And things like integrity. Having integrity, I think, is important for anybody in senior roles. Being a good leader means also being a good listener. Not being the dominant autocratic style, but at the same time being able to make decisions quickly when you need to. Being able to put a good leadership team together and work with other people as a leadership team and use the skills around you, not just what you think yourself. And I think ability to work through an organisation, not just lead at the top, but lead right down into an organisation and, reach out and be known as the leader and working with people right through the organisation and not sitting in the corner office, so to speak.
I asked a question earlier around the feedback that you got in your exec career, and you talked about, always being open to it and aware of what's going on. Is there any moments that stand out for you about feedback you got as a non-executive director that have really helped you be successful in this space?
Yeah, that's hard to know. I guess it's like I'm always a believer in observing and learning from other people as well.
Yeah.
And I don't think boards are terribly good at feedback between directors, so to speak. And I think without, and it's not to the same degree as you get in your executive type roles. So you've sort of got to have your own antenna up and seek feedback if you need it. But also, I guess, be observant, be aware. And I think you sense when your contributions are valued and when they're not valued. And that gives you cause for reflection, I think, about that worked well, that didn't work well, that resulted in a good discussion or whatever it might have been. So and I think it's outside the boardroom when you're meeting with your directors in a slightly more casual setting, is when you can also get a sense and talk to people about how it's going from your perspective or their perspective, and that's where you get better, I think, direct and indirect feedback. I think boards, they do, look, you go through these board reviews, which are good, and, that throws up issues, and the issues tend to be issues for the board, not necessarily one by one issues, but I think you reflect on what those issues are to see how you think you participate or how you work with those issues, and are you contributing back to perhaps to a weakness that's come up as part of your board reviews, or have you contributed to something that's being called out as being a strength? So I think they've given a lot of cause for reflection for me about, because you're getting that external set of eyes as well to look at how the board's functioning.
So if you're mentoring someone who's considering building a board career and you had just 2 pieces of advice to give them, what would they be?
Reflecting back on some of our earlier discussion, get some runs on the board in terms of your experience. And secondly, have a good strategy about what it is you are looking to do in terms of types of boards, sort of contribution that you do want to make. And I'd probably add that third bit in about don't let yourself get financially dependent on any board.
Brilliant advice. So, Kathy, the final question I ask everybody in these interviews is, what does brave feminine leadership mean? And do you think it needs to change?
Yeah, it's interesting you use the word brave, because I think at times you have to be brave in leadership as a female. I think it's two things. It's being prepared to take a risk, and it's being confident. I think many females lack that confidence. I think it's getting better with the younger ones coming through, but I think when I reflect back, I may not have had the confidence to apply for those roles if they were put out for application. Instead, I was just tapped on the shoulder. So you sort of lack that confidence and you think you have to do everything perfectly in that role. And maybe I haven't done that before, so I don't know whether I'd be able to do that. But you've got to have confidence in your own abilities, and sometimes take that step, take that risk that puts you into a slightly uncomfortable zone, but test you out. And once you've passed that test, you've got that under your belt, and you've added another level of experience, skill, whatever it is, to your CV. So I think being brave means having confidence, taking a risk where perhaps our male colleagues think, I'm good at everything, I couldn't possibly go wrong. I'm generalising, of course.
Yes.
But I think we tend to think a little more critically about things and maybe think of the negatives too much and not the positives.
Do you think, it just occurs to me to ask this, I normally would finish the interview on the back of that question, but when I think back to your career, and you had obviously these incredible leaders who recognised something in you and continued to suggest opportunities for progression, do you feel like there was a point in your career, whether it was in the NED space or in your exec career, do you feel like there was a point where that changed and you kind of went, I am going to take these risks now?
Yeah, I think once I went into those operational roles, it opened your eyes to a much wider sphere of activities and new activities that you hadn't done before. And when you gradually work your way through them and you did okay in them, you sort of think, oh, okay, I can do that. I can take on a bit more. I can perhaps think about something else. I think it's just getting that experience and then thinking positively about it. That okay, and putting your head down and doing the hard work on it at the same time. But just it boosts your confidence a little bit, I think, to think, oh, well, I did okay at that, and maybe I can do something else as well. So I think it's just getting it through experience by taking that risk and working on it.
Kathy, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I didn't say this earlier in the conversation, but often I'm, looking for wonderful leaders to interview. And I can't tell you over the last 3 years how many times your name has come up. So you're incredible. Look at the look of surprise on your face. But you're obviously incredibly highly respected, across a wonderful career in leading this. So thank you for joining the conversation. I feel so honoured to have had you join us, Kathy.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Very happy to have done it, and I wish you well with all those conversations. I've listened to a few and they're all different and all interesting.
Thank you so much, Kathy.